Whatever you do, don't birth on your back because this is actually something that is going to sabotage your natural birth, undermine your confidence, possibly lead to unnecessary medical intervention, including an episiotomy, vacuum assisted delivery, forceps assisted delivery. You could have more tearing. And you could even get a C-section. Not to mention, it could damage your pelvic floor. Hi, my name is Carly Bonderud, and this is the Empowered Birth Series where I go deep into everything that you need to know to plan and get your empowered, true, natural birth. And if you've been following along with this series, then you know that we're going into the 20 natural birth traps. And this is trap number 19, birthing on your back. So if you're new to me, you might be wondering, what is a natural birth trap? Well, if you already know, then you can skip ahead. And if you don't, then let me just tell you, I basically coined this term way back in 2022 when I was creating my book, Your Empowered Birth. A natural birth trap is exactly what it sounds like. You think that you're doing everything right to have a natural birth. And then somewhere along the way, you fall into a trap. And you end up getting a birth that's more painful, more traumatic. You have more intervention than you were really planning to have. And you're wondering, what happened? I did everything right. I hired a midwife. I was planning a natural birth. I ended up taking all of the classes. I was preparing my body. I was doing all of the things. I should have had a natural birth. Is it my body? Is it broken? Maybe it's me. Well, no, actually, it's quite possible you fell into one of those natural birth traps. In fact, this is not your fault because the way that our birth culture and medical system perpetuate these traps as normal is often what leads to moms falling into them. And here at Empowering Moms, I'm all about you getting the right information, the information that might have been kept from you if you're a seasoned mom or even a VBAC mom watching this video. But if you're a first-time mom, you're going to have an advantage that I didn't even have. You see, I was a star student and I had gone in thinking that I knew everything there was to know about having a natural birth because, after all, I had been consuming birth information for 9 months. But then at 35 weeks, I got tricked into having a hospital birth and I almost got a C-section. And the reason was because I was birthing on my back, which I knew instinctively was not the right position for me. It led to a lot of trauma. And fortunately, I was able to avoid the episiotomy, but not the tear. The tear itself was surface level. Let me just tell you that because I was able to still push when my body told me to push. But it never would have happened if I hadn't been birthing on my back. And let me just tell you, it was the moment that I decided I was never going to be that powerless ever again. I have made good on that promise today as the empowered mom who teaches you how to basically plan and get your empowered true natural birth. So the thing about these master classes that's different though, is that this isn't a fluff video. If you have basically stumbled upon this and you're thinking, oh, what is this really long video? This is an actual master class. And I want you to treat this as if you had actually paid money for it. I want you to treat this as if you had basically plunked down, oh, say $97 and you wanted to listen to something on the go because, you know, you don't have to watch the video. You can just listen to it. After all, YouTube is a playlist, is it not? You can still listen to the music or listen to somebody talking while you're doing other things. Although you're probably going to want to pay attention and come back to this later when you have more time. The reason for that is because these master classes are also incredibly dense with information. Information is free and I only charge for access to me. That means that I'm going to literally give you the map to avoid birthing on your back unless it's intuitive. And I'm also going to tell you more about the empowered birth method and how you can go deeper. Now, here's another little added bonus of the Empowered Birth series, and that is that we also have transcripts available. I'm not talking about the AI transcript that YouTube automatically generates. I'm talking about a deep dive PDF that we basically put inside of the description of the video itself. If that transcript is already there, then you can go down to the description right now and you can download it. You can see what we've done. We basically highlighted this so that you have the headlines, you have an overview, You can read the bold text, and I've embedded links. If the transcript is not currently available, I mean, sometimes our software kind of does that thing where it doesn't want to work. Don't worry, it will be available soon enough. And in the meantime, the basics is that we have this masterclass for you. I want to make sure that you understand that the masterclass is the priority because you have a visual, you have auditory, and then at the same time, you can do implementation. The other thing is that you're going to want to watch these at least 3 times. The first time you get the overview, the second time you get the aha moments, and the third time is basically integration. If you implement any of the steps of the Empowered Birth method or choose to go deeper with anything within the Empowered Birth series, then that is also going to allow you to plan and get the birth you want without having to fight, beg, or compromise. The reason I do this is because I don't work with everyone who comes to me. And originally, when I was running series like this inside of my Facebook group, people would always reach out and they'd want to have a call with me. But the information that they wanted was very surface level. And I want to make sure that my coaching goes to the moms who need it most, especially for my coaching queens as well, because anybody who joins my team, we have a priority where you come first. So moms fill their own cups here at Empowering Moms. And if you don't have your cup overfilling, then you need to pour back into yourself. So basically what this means is that if you cannot afford to get a course, or maybe you need to buy groceries or invest in something else like a doula or a birth location, I don't want you spending a whole lot of money on courses and childbirth classes. So information is free and I only charge for access to me. That being said, I may also reference other courses that I do find valuable that could be worth your time and energy because it also goes to a greater cause. So it's not just buying a childbirth class, it's contributing to a movement. And here at Empowering Moms, I'm all about shifting the tides. So how these master classes basically work, if you are not familiar, is that first I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. Then after I've told you the story, I'm going to tell you how this trap undermines your confidence, how it leads to unnecessary medical intervention, and how it sabotages your true natural birth. Go and check out my start guide, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, to know more about true natural birth if you're not familiar. But basically, this is the default setting of your body. Your body is designed to birth, your body will birth, and it's everything else on the outside that kind of sabotages it. So true natural birth is basically physiological birth. It is the birth that you actually want to have. It is not the kind that is painful and traumatic, and you're just basically going unmedicated. So the thing that you need to understand is that the medical system and our birth culture has basically got this idea of unmedicated and natural birth mixed up. So they've appropriated the term natural birth to mean anything from vaginal birth to unmedicated birth to an induced labor where you just didn't have any of the drugs. And then the end result is often more trauma, and you say natural birth traumatized me, when really you just didn't get that physiological birth. It wasn't supported. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I can't get into all of them in this video, but you can check out some of my other videos, or you can go to the starter guide, as I said, because I have the overview and I tell you the mistakes you're making as a first-time mom, a VBAC mom, a seasoned mom. I tell you the empowered birth method, and I tell you more about true natural birth and the misconceptions. I've also added extra goodies too. So you can go and get some freebie guides. You can go and jump onto our newsletter. I share a lot within the Empowered Birth Weekly newsletter as well. So you'd probably want to take advantage of that, particularly if you're doing the do-it-yourself path, which, I will tell you more about that later. But, with these master classes, after I go into the physiological sabotaging of your birth, I'm also going to tell you things to consider in this one. Because, I did notice that with my second baby, I needed to kind of lean semi-reclining, and there were reasons for that. So I'm not saying never birth on your back. I'm saying don't use that as the default setting. Once we've done that, I'm going to go into the context of how this happened in the first place and why, so that you can understand where the medical system is coming from. Because the more you can understand the water that they're swimming in, the more you can advocate strongly for yourself. I will also give you some additional tips on how to apply the empowered birth method. I will tell you about ways to go deeper, and I will tell you about those 3 paths I mentioned on getting the empowered birth method. Finally, I will recap for you, and then I will also tell you about what is next in the series. And we're almost done. So if you are new to me and you haven't really been following along, go inside of the Natural Birth Traps playlist and check out the rest of this series, because I have basically laced all of the birth tips and birth advocacy secrets within these master classes. You're going to want to dive deep, as I said. Treat this as if you had actually paid a lot of money to get these courses. Okay, so now that you know a little bit more about what to expect, let's dive into the story. So, way back when I was a first-time mom, I knew instinctively I didn't want to be on my back. I had had enough stories and I'd seen enough in media to know that birthing on my back just sounded horrible. First of all, I didn't really want my legs splayed for everybody to see my business. And I didn't want somebody telling me to push. And I didn't want to be laying there like a turtle on my back. And it was always an image in my head that I saw on TV and in movies that just terrified me. I was like, this is terrible. This is not giving me any agency. It wasn't until I was all grown up when I realized that there was something called water birth. And I saw these beautiful images and these videos of moms who were just moving through the waves, and they were just sitting there in the pool and they were leaned forward and they were relaxed, and there was nobody up in their business. In fact, nobody could really see what was going on down there. The midwife would just pull the baby from the water. And I'm like, that's the kind of birth I want. I don't want to be on my back begging for somebody to let me up. I don't want to be screaming and telling people to get away from me. And I definitely don't want that episiotomy that everybody in my family seems to think is better than a tear. So I knew instinctively where I wanted to be birthing was at home. Now, I ended up getting tricked out of that. You can go and read my book, Your Empowered Birth, if you're not familiar. And ultimately, what happened is that I was in the tub at the hospital, and this was a very shallow tub. Honestly, in hindsight, I wouldn't have been able to give birth in that tub because it wasn't deep enough. You need to be in a very deep pool in order to birth effectively. And this one, the water didn't even come up to my chest. So if the water doesn't come up high enough, then when you are trying to squat in the pool, you actually risk your baby taking a breath and then going back underwater, which you don't want. So yes, there are some little dangers that can happen if you're not doing water birth effectively. If you really want to understand this, I would suggest checking out Barbara Harper's book, Gentle Birth Choices. And, anything by Barbara Harper on the water birth is probably really good information. There's also the Coalition for Water Birth of Canada, and there's other coalitions as well for water birth. But basically, water birth has been restricted in hospitals. The reason is basically they don't understand about water birth, and they don't really support physiological birth as well. They probably wouldn't know a physiological birth if it smacked them upside the head. There are some OBs that do support water birth. There are some doctors that understand physiology of birth. There's nurses and there's midwives as well in the hospital system. The problem is that they're usually not the ones in charge. And then there's the insurance on top of that. Who's going to insure this in case something goes wrong? There's a lot of fear around birth. So when water birth is restricted, it really restricts moms from being able to have the birth that they really want. And in my case, I realized that I didn't want to be birthing on land. And I was told, you can labor in the tub, but you cannot birth in the tub. And I tried to break that rule a little bit. And I noticed that I'm not contracting anymore, but I think I'm 10 centimeters because I can feel that there is absolutely no cervix left because, yes, I checked myself. And then I attempted to push. And as soon as this happened, this is when the nurse realized what I was doing and she flipped out and they pulled me from the tub and they dragged me towards the bed. And I didn't want to get on the bed, but they kept insisting that I get on the bed. They couldn't lift me though. As long as I was resisting, they couldn't lift me. But then my partner came into the room, my former partner, and he didn't know what to do. And he had defaulted to what the midwife and the nurse wanted, which was to put me on the bed. And he could bench press me plus our kids. So he just picked me up like I weighed nothing and put me on the bed. This then led to me trying to get onto my side. They didn't like that. They had me on my back, semi-reclining, and that is where I stayed for 3 hours trying to push my baby out. While everybody around me was telling me to push, my body wasn't ready to push. But because of the fact that I did not want a C-section, I knew that I was basically on borrowed time, and I was terrified. You know, trying to push your baby out when you're terrified is not exactly going to help things along. So contractions were slowing down, and I remember just how horrible it was. And I kept trying to get up the incline of the bed to try to flip myself back onto hands and knees. And I couldn't because the nurse was like, hold her leg. And one nurse is holding the leg, and my partner is holding my other leg. So I am completely like flat on my back trying to get my baby out. I get to the point where I'm now about 2 hours in and I have been pushing for this long and I am exhausted, but I'm not going to give up because there's no way in hell that I'm going to allow them to cut me. And there's no way in hell that I'm going to allow them to give me a C-section as long as my baby was doing well. At this point, they'd also strapped on the fetal monitor again, because the nurse got tired of holding the Doppler in place while I was pushing. So I've got this monitor on, I'm completely strapped down, and I'm trying to push this baby out. And I'm also swearing and telling people to leave me alone. I'm asking for the gas and air because I just want to be able to relax, and I can't relax while they're yelling at me and trying to get me to do what I need to do. And there's also this feeling, there's this kind of like spidey sense telling me there's doctors outside this door and they are waiting to give me a C-section. Sure enough, this was confirmed inside of my reports later that I've read. And, you know, when I was reading them, I kind of got mad because they were like, well, this first time mom, she was having an arrested labor. And I was like, no, I'm not having an arrested labor. I'm not having an arrested delivery phase. I just don't want to be here. Like, that's really it, is I just didn't want to be there. So I'm pushing and I'm pushing, and finally I start to feel things kind of moving because now things are supposed to be moving, but I have no gravity to help me. In fact, gravity is working against me because I'm pushing uphill. My son had a big head. And he was not a tiny baby. He was almost 8 pounds. And here I am, 110 pounds soaking wet, 140 pounds pregnant. And I'm trying to push out this kid and I'm flat on my back. And, you know, there's things with your pelvis that if you are on your back, your pelvis isn't able to open up as wide as it could if you were in a hands and knees position. I will be getting into that when I talk about birth physiology. There's also going to be some embedded links inside of the transcript so that you can basically look through and see, oh, these are the positions. Because, you know, instead of just giving you a whole bunch of resources that I've created myself, I believe that information needs to be freely accessible. And if you don't know where to find it, if you don't know where to find all of the really good childbirth education, then you're kind of stuck with mainstream. And I'll talk more about that next week, by the way. Okay, so now I'm pushing my baby out and I can feel that he's finally moving. And I can notice that it's really, really difficult now at this point. But I am using all of the strength that I have to get him out. I am doing the thing that I didn't want to do, which is actually counterproductive. I was holding my breath and I was purple pushing. I was going, and actually trying to hold my breath and push like they had told me to do. This damaged my pelvic floor, which then led to me basically realizing, I don't want to ever do that again. Fortunately, with my second, I didn't have to because my uterus just took over and pushed the baby out, and there was no pushing. But this purple pushing that they do is really the reason why so many pelvic floors are damaged, because that's not the way that birth was actually designed to be. And because of that, I also realized my baby the waters were still intact. So his head was still in a squishy water balloon, which also led to me not having the gravity. So by the time I finally pushed really, really, really hard, that's when the water balloon burst. The amniotic sac just burst open and splashed the midwife. Serves them right. I mean, if they were going to make me be birthing on my back and completely exposed, then serves them right that I ended up splashing the entire delivery room. But the thing you really need to understand is that at this point is when you usually get that ring of fire. And this is why I really don't recommend birthing on your back, because you are stretched to the limit. And now you are also completely exposed to whatever your care provider wants to do. And your care provider is going to likely be impatient. Not to mention that if you have your legs sort of closed a little bit, that can reduce tearing. So there's a lot of things that we instinctively do when we're pushing, when we're having a physiological birth, that often doesn't happen in the hospital, because instead of you trusting your instincts, you are basically being told how to have your legs, how to push, how to basically slow things down or speed up. Now, I knew instinctively at this point that I needed to slow down my pushing. I was now at the point where I could feel the stinging sensation. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to breathe through this. I'm going to pant through this. I'm going to give myself a minute to stretch, and then I will birth my baby. But this is the point where the OB outside my door decided to step into the room. So I see this woman, and I'm like, I've never seen this woman before, but I just instinctively know she's up to no good. And the midwife is then like, that's the OB. And if you do not push right now and get this baby out right now, she's going to give you an episiotomy. I'm like, oh, hell no, you are not giving me an episiotomy. And that's when I tore a tiny little bit up top. So I just had a very mild tear. It didn't go into the urethra, but at the same time, it was like, I knew that it was going to happen. It was like an upper labial tear. And it really wasn't anything. It kind of felt like an elastic band just kind of snapping. And I didn't need any stitches, but it still pisses me off, because the fact is that never should have happened. And I know that my midwife did what she had to do to try to help me avoid a worse fate. At the same time, the midwife shouldn't have had to do that at all. She should have been able to support me the way that she knew instinctively I needed to be supported, rather than have the medical system come down like they were doing. And again, there were 3 OBs outside my door, and one had decided to finally step inside. So the thing you really need to understand is that birthing on your back is a lot harder, and you're more exposed. You're more likely to do things that you weren't going to do instinctively, because of the fact that you really don't have any other options. And this is why, again, if you're going to do a hospital birth, you need to be aiming for a true natural birth, and possibly even hands off, which means you need a care provider who's going to be hands off. Because birth upright or birth on your hands and knees or on your side is much more preferable than birthing on your back, because birthing on your back narrows your pelvic outlet. They don't tell you that, though. Okay, so now you know the story, and you know why I would never birth on my back again. But I'm also going to say that during my actual labor with my daughter, I had been mostly on my hands and knees for the entire labor process inside the water. And then when the surges of contractions started and my baby was starting to come out, I recognized that she was a little bit high up as she was coming out. I'm like, okay, if I continue on this direction, she's going to possibly cause me to tear upwards. And I don't want that. So I leaned back a little bit more to sort of angle her so that she wouldn't rip me up the top because she was coming so fast. So instinctively, I knew what position to be in. And that turned out to be basically leaning backwards, like kind of like this. So I wasn't flat on my back though, because flat on your back can also cut off oxygen because again, your baby is not really in the best position. But being semi-reclining in the water is much different than being semi-reclining on a bed. So the more you understand how birth physiology works, the more you realize how much of a trap this really is. And 99% of births in the hospital happen with moms on their back. So when you think about that data, then you can also kind of see why there's a lot of moms that say that they were pushing for several hours and then they ended up with an episiotomy, or they were pushing for several hours and they damaged their pelvic floor, or they were pushing and they tore really badly. All of these things would be avoidable if people would stop putting moms on their backs. The thing that really drives me crazy, though, is that a lot of birth attendants know this. Lamaze has even spoken about this, get mom off her back. Doulas know this instinctively, get mom off her back. And midwives also know, get mom off her back. And yet the hospitals still put moms on their back for birth. So despite the fact that we have evidence, overwhelming evidence, that birth on the back is not supportive of physiological birth, it's still happening. And the reason for that is because profit, convenience, and liability, and the lack of support for physiological birth. And there's a lot of category 5s in the medical system. You know, the profession kind of attracts them. Go check out some of my other videos where I talk about unsupportive care providers and category 5. The other thing is that a lot of moms end up with the epidural. And the reason they do that is because they are not having a physiological birth. They end up getting induced. They end up falling into natural birth traps that make birth more painful and more traumatic. And, you know, there are ways for moms to birth even with the epidural, but most people don't know this and they're not getting the right education. So here at Empowering Moms, my philosophy is that information needs to be readily accessible to everyone. You shouldn't have to dig for that information, and you really shouldn't be barred from that information just because you can't pay for it, because, you know, that doesn't help moms either. I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money, and when I was having my first baby, we didn't have a lot of money. I could barely afford a doula. She actually agreed to work with me based on a payment plan where all I had to do was cover childcare expenses. And even then, that was still a stretch for me and my former partner. So I couldn't really afford childbirth classes. And the ones that I did get to go to for the hospital birth was my mother had paid for them. And then in addition to that, there were free classes that I could attend with my midwife group. But aside from that, I was basically trying to get all of the information and I was looking for it mostly for free. So that's why information is free, because I want you to have an empowered birth, whether you could afford to work with me or not, whether you could get any of my self-study programs. If you don't have the time to go through them, then you can listen to these master classes. Although, you know, I even try to design my courses to be able to be completed within 6 hours. So all you have to do is check out some of those courses and do the homework, and you're going to get the transformation. But at any level, I am committed to you having an empowered birth. So, how does birthing on your back undermine your confidence? Well, first of all, this is what basically happened to me is as a first-time mom, I thought, "Oh no, I'm not going to be able to do this after all. I have a small pelvis and it's taking much longer to push my baby out than I thought it would." My mom said that I came out in a couple of pushes. So, what's wrong with me? And when the hospital has this timeline for pushing and you're pushing uphill, and your pelvic outlet is narrowed, and you may not even be ready to push, it's just that you got to 10 centimeters, then what this does is it has you thinking, maybe I should just get that C-section. Maybe I should just accept that episiotomy. And when I got to the 2.5 hour mark, that is where I started to feel like maybe I should just get this. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to end up with a C-section. All of this work for nothing. And I'm going to end up with a C-section or an episiotomy. They're going to damage my body to get my baby out because I am not able to do it. And there was something inside of me that basically every time somebody's ever told me I'm not allowed to do something, or every time that my dream looks like it slipped away, I fight. I go into the darkness and I think, well, what would happen if I actually gave up this dream? If I actually gave in and let them tell me what I'm capable of, what would happen? And then I go into that place and I think about how much regret I would have if I had given into the C-section or the episiotomy. And something snapped in me that day. I'm like, no, that's not happening. And I took another deep breath and I pushed harder and I just kept pushing. I was not going to give up. I just kept going. And because of that, because I got good and mad and I was directing that anger and that rage into each push, that is how I managed to finally get my baby out. But make no mistake, my confidence was severely undermined. And there's moms that just, for whatever reason, they're like, I tried to push and it didn't work and I ended up getting a C-section. And the truth is that their confidence was just undermined. It was undermined by them thinking that birth needs to happen a certain way and that if they can't birth on their back, then they must be broken and defective, rather than recognizing that maybe it's not them. Maybe it's the position that they're in. Maybe it's the stress of the environment that they're in. Maybe it's the fact that baby needs a lot more room than what birthing on your back is going to do. So when you realize that this undermines your confidence, this then leads to the unnecessary medical intervention. Because if you are not pushing at the time frame that they want you to birth that baby, then they are more likely to suggest the episiotomy. And there are some care providers that don't even ask, they just do. And, there's been stories of moms who have basically been fighting with their doctors and saying, I don't want the episiotomy. And the doctor's like, well, you don't know what's best for you. And I'm just going to do it anyway. This is why you need a doula. And this is why you need to train up your partner to be able to stand for you. And this is also why we need to get rid of the category 5s, because the category 5 care provider is all about ego. The category 5 care provider will give you that episiotomy or give you that C-section just to teach you a lesson. How dare you question their authority? They suck. And we really need to get rid of them in the system. Because, evidence has said that episiotomy is really not a good idea. And there was a time when everybody got the episiotomy. Now, there's a whole bunch of things I could go into about why that is. And a lot of it is based on the idea that women were treated as defective machines and doctors wanted to make all the money and they liked to cut. So that's what they did, is they cut. And because they cut, they just thought everybody could use the cut because it makes things more effective. Forget the fact that a lot of women of generations who all had episiotomies now have problems with their pelvic floor. No, we're just going to ignore that and we're going to say that's just childbirth as it is. It's nothing to do with the actual interventions that we did to women back then. No, it's you. So there's been a lot of gaslighting and there's been a lot of medical interventions. So if you're birthing on your back, you're more exposed and more likely they are going to do things to you. If, however, you are on your hands and knees, they can't get access to you as easily, right? If you are standing up, they can't get access to you. If you are squatting, they can't get as much access to you. And the less access that they have to you, the more likely you are going to be able to get that natural birth without those interventions. The final thing is that it sabotages your physiological process, because if you are getting into a position that other people are telling you to get into, most likely on your back, because that's the one that they can see everything better, then what this does is it kind of makes it so that you aren't able to move your body in the way that you need to for your baby to navigate your pelvis. Your pelvis is not fused. And this is the thing that drives me crazy about the small pelvis argument. Because the truth is that your pelvis is a lot of cartilage. It's not just bone. Unless you happen to have had steel infused into your pelvis or titanium or something, you are going to be able to birth your baby effectively if you can actually move those structures of your pelvis. So as you can see, the joints kind of move here, okay? So with everything kind of fused, these are like where you would have the cartilage. And, there's a piece that kind of got broken off here, but there's actually like another piece, the coccyx, and it moves so that it will open up and allow the baby's head to come out. So when you recognize that the female pelvis is designed to birth, and at the end of pregnancy, hormones kind of come in that allow your pelvis to relax even more, to loosen up. And sometimes this can be where you get a lot of pelvic discomfort because of the fact that everything is kind of like shaky. I actually have this. It's called symphysis pubis dysfunction. But really what's going on is that I take a step and it feels like my leg is like about to give way at the end of my pregnancy. It's not fun, but it serves a purpose, because when I give birth, it's like, psh, baby is out. Now, the thing is that we are laying on our backs for birth, and our pelvis isn't able to move as well as if we were kind of on our hands and knees. Baby is now also kind of laying back against your pelvic outlet, and they are laying back against your spine. Whereas if you are moving forward, they are cradled into your belly, which means that they're able to navigate a lot easier. The other thing you need to understand is that if you have your legs spread outward, this actually will narrow in your hips so that your back and your buttocks are tight. So your pelvic floor gets tight when you spread your legs. Your pelvic floor opens up more if you have your knees in and your legs out. So if you have your knees in and then outward, this allows for you to have the widest pelvic outlet. So this is again why you want to be on your hands and knees. Because what are they doing when they have you on your back is they also usually have your legs spread wide apart. This also leads to tearing because, if you're instinctively closing your legs a little bit, what's that doing? That's allowing your baby to slow down their movements as they are widening open your birth canal and stretching you, and then being able to get to the outside. So because of that, you're more likely to tear if they suddenly say, oh, you have to spread your legs wide. Yeah, of course you are. That makes sense, right? When you really understand birth physiology, it makes sense. So the other thing, if you want to go deeper with this, is I would suggest you check out Rachel Reed's book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, because it goes deeper into this. But one thing I really want you to take away about birthing on your back and how this affects your ability to give birth is that if 99% of people were giving birth on their backs and the medical system is used to that, then maybe that is why the small pelvis myth even came about in the first place. Because the truth is that there's two different kinds of pelvises, as my dear friend Gloria LeMay has said. There is the ample pelvis, and you could fit a pony through there, honey. So recognize that you can actually birth your baby unless your pelvis is actually fused with titanium, or you had a bone disease when you were a child and your pelvis is malformed. this is something that happened in history. I mean, there was polio, there was rickets. That makes sense. But today, we are less likely to have those issues. So it's not about the pelvis. It's about what is being facilitated. So let's get into that context, okay? So the thing you really need to understand about the context of why we're birthing on our backs is because when men took over childbirth, they wanted to use their tools. And in order to use their tools, they need to have a good view. And in order to have a good view, you have to be on your back. Before men took over childbirth, midwives had women on birthing stools. Women were birthing upright. There were images of women who would basically be hanging from a rope and then pulling on that rope as they were squatting down to allow them to pull themselves up and get into that squat. Women were not birthing on their backs. And then all of a sudden, men decided to take over childbirth. And there's a kind of a rumor. I'm not even sure if it's 100% true. I mean, it makes sense. And at the same time, there is evidence on both sides, one saying, oh, that's not true, and the other side saying, oh, no, it was totally true. But there was a French king, Louis XVI, who basically had wanted to watch his mistresses give birth and his queen give birth. He got off on it. And so because he couldn't really see what was going on with the birthing stool, they fashioned a special bed and the women were all birthing on that bed so that their legs were spread apart so that he could get a good view. And that then also led to the trend of, oh, I guess royalty is birthing on their backs because the king has all his mistresses on their backs. So that must be fashionable. I mean, I don't know if it's actually true. It's not like I can go up to King Louis the 16th and say, hey, do you really get your jollies on watching women give birth? Or maybe he would just deny it, but then I just go to the women and I'd be like, hey, did he really do that? Oh yeah, he totally did that. Ew, what? Why? Why would he do that? I don't know, but it's just something he wanted to do. And I figured it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I didn't realize how awful it would be, but like we didn't really have any agency back then. I mean, if I had a time machine, I'd totally go back in time and I'd be like that gossip girl of the of the 1800s and the 1700s, just like getting all of the tea, like Lady Whistledown. And I'd just find out all of the information and see what was going on. I'd probably also plant seeds of rebellion because, I'm me. But the thing that you really need to get, though, is that the reason that you are birthing on your back is not for your own comfort. It's not to facilitate your birth physiology. It's not safer. It's not the best way for your baby to come out into the world. It is literally for the convenience of the medical system. It is literally for the convenience of the doctor who wants to be able to see what's going on so that they can bring out their tools and do something. That is why they do that. And if you want to have a completely natural birth and you want to have your autonomy and not leave your dignity at the door, then get off your back, because seriously, this is something that needs to change. And the only way it's going to change is if we stop playing the game. So the thing that you really need to understand is that birth on your back, you don't want to do it. The only time you want to do that is if instinctively, like I noticed, that you need to be on your back for whatever reason. Maybe you recognize that you're about to have a high tear and you're like, you know what? I kind of need to be on my back. But even so, you need to make sure that your doula and your partner know to get you off your back when you're ready. You don't want to stay on your back. Okay? All right. So now that we've covered the context, we're going to go into the empowered birth method itself. Okay. So applying the empowered birth method to your birth plan is what we're really going for. So before you even hire your care provider, you need to make sure that this care provider is not going to be the one that's going to force you onto your back. In order to do that, you need to create your birth plan first, and you need to get past any lingering fear that birth on your back is better, or that if you are birthing on your hands and knees, that you're more likely to tear, or any of those other horror stories. Because you know what? Fear is what keeps you stuck. Fear is what keeps you compliant with the medical system and following their recommendations, not yours. So you need to have the right mindset around this. You need to recognize that you are the birth consumer, you are the birth visionary, and it is your map that everybody needs to be following. You need to get past your fear so that you can come to your birth from a place of power. And ultimately, you also need to have that right education. Learn about those different positions and try to do it before 35 weeks. The earlier you understand about physiological birth, the better. And a lot of childbirth education doesn't come into play until 28 weeks. I suggest that you start earlier than that. There's some wonderful resources. Spinning Babies is a good one. And you can basically look at any physiological birth education because there's a lot of moms that free birth out there. There's a lot of moms that do hands-off birth, even with a midwife in attendance. And we kind of know more about pushing our babies out than the medical system seems to know about pushing our babies out because they are used to things basically being efficient. You also need to understand about how they're trained because they usually have some sort of mechanical doll, and this doll is flat on their back. And then the mechanism is pushing the baby out, and then they are trained to catch the baby. This is not physiological birth. This is, again, a mechanical means, and they are trained to basically facilitate birth on a mom's back. This is not helpful at all. You want the midwife who's like, oh, I'll catch the baby in any position. Or better yet, have them help you catch your own baby. Because if you can catch your baby, you are less likely to be rushed and you're able to do it on your own. Plus, it's a rush of power to be able to catch your own baby. I personally wasn't able to catch because my daughter was in the water and she shot out like a little torpedo, and I had my hands behind me. However, what I was able to do was I was able to touch the top of her head as she was coming out, and nobody else touched me. I was also able to guide my body as she was coming out. And finally, after she shot out like a torpedo, the midwife just picked her up and put her into my arms. Partners can also catch the baby, and this can be absolutely beautiful as well. I have watched as my clients have their partners catch their babies, and there's just something so breathtaking about the first time that I witnessed this. And my client, Rebecca, who you can read about inside my book, Your Empowered Birth, she and her partner basically decided to do the birth on their own. They wanted to have a home birth after 2 cesareans. No midwife was able to attend them. So they decided that if something actually went wrong, they would transfer to the hospital. They were 5 minutes away, or they would call somebody to them. Nothing went wrong. And when she was pushing her baby out, her partner was like, oh, here, I see the head. And he got all excited because they'd had 2 C-sections previously and they had been robbed of their experience. And he's like, we were really robbed. Like, there was something beautiful about him being able to catch his final child. And, it's just such a beautiful connected experience. So if you're thinking about having your partner catch, that can also allow you to get into a different position than just on your back. So once you have that right education and you understand you can have your partner catch and watch a whole bunch of videos and read articles and learn more about catching your own baby, unassisted childbirth books are really helpful for this. The next thing is you need the right environment for this. Obviously, the best one would be to stay home. If you stay home, you are able to control your environment. But if you are in the hospital, you need to make sure that you are going to a hospital that will either leave you alone or that you can sort of set things up. So this is what Jenny did, is that when she was pushing, she was in the hospital and she had a doula who was basically keeping the nurse from getting her hands on Jenny. And Jenny's partner also was very trained up and he knew how to hold space for her. So the nurse had gone back to the station and she was going to call the doctor because she's like, oh, maybe I should actually call the doctor. You think? And as she was gone, this is when Jenny was finally birthing. And she had the doula and her partner help her catch her baby because she was again upright. And then she walked over to the bed with the cord still inside. And she then birthed the placenta on the bed 10 minutes later. So, understanding that if you're in the right environment where maybe it's not going to be completely toxic, nobody's going to force you onto the bed and force you down, because this has happened with other hospitals where they are so full of category 5s of control and fear. And it's just horrible what they do. You need to do your research. I suggest talking to doulas. Talk to doulas about what that hospital is actually like. Don't go with the PR, the splashy website, or do the hospital tour and they say, oh, yeah, you can totally birth in any position. Because you know what? They told me the same thing. Inside of that childbirth class that I took that was basically for the hospital, they said I could birth in any position. But when it came down to it, I was on my back. There was no squat bar. They weren't using that. They weren't using anything except the force of getting me onto my back to birth. So recognizing that just because they say that you're allowed doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And if it's not true, the ones who are going to know that the most are going to be the doulas who are in those hospitals. They are the ones that are going to talk. There are a few labor and delivery nurses, and there's some midwives out there that will loosen their tongue and they will say things, and they'll say it in a certain way in certain circles, but usually not to their clients. Usually this is behind closed doors. Usually this is in a circle of other birth workers. And I've heard those stories because I was in those circles. But outside of that, their hands are usually tied and they can't say certain things to their clients because then they would get in trouble. Go check out some of my other videos on the birth advocacy secrets and category 5s and unsupportive care providers, because that is going to give you more of an idea. And if you go and get the birth advocacy report, which comes with the Empowered Birth Toolkit and your Empowered Birth Workshop, then you're going to have a better idea of what is really going on. Next, you need the right facilitator. You need the one who is going to sit on their hands. Because if they want you on your back, guess what? You no longer have the ability to control how your birth is going. You are now flat on your back. You can't get back up off of your back very easily when you are birthing your baby. So the second you're on your back, you're basically a turtle on your back unless somebody helps you up out of that position. And if your care provider wants you on your back, guess where you're staying. So you need to be hiring according to what you really want. And this is why I suggest that you create your birth plan first. Because if you create your birth plan first, then you go to the care providers and you're like, okay, I plan to birth on my hands and knees or any position that I want. I'm not going on my back. Preferably, I want this to be a hands-off birth, and I'll let you know if I want any help. I want my partner to catch, or I'm going to catch. How are you going to support me in that? If they are like, oh, no, I always catch the baby because you are not qualified, you know that that's not the right person for you. You want the one that'd be like, I've never tried that before, but it might be interesting to do that. So we can talk about that. I do have some concerns because, I have seen things in the past. And at the same time, I mean, if nothing's going wrong, I don't see any reason. Like, you're like, oh yeah, I've got a backup plan in case something goes awry and I need your support. I mean, of course, that's why I'm hiring you. Otherwise, I just do a free birth, right? So if you're just planning to do a free birth, you still need to know that there's backup. And if you're going to call in that medical backup, you need to have somebody who is going to be like, okay, yeah, she wanted a free birth. She's come in for a little bit of extra support, and I'm going to facilitate so that she can still have most of her autonomy in this birth. You don't want the one that's like, oh, she just tried to free birth and I'm going to teach her a lesson now and give her all the things. No. You don't want that one. Finally, within the rights facilitators, if you can hire a doula, and this doula is not squeamish about possibly needing to catch a baby that's about to fall on the floor or a placenta that's about to fall on the floor, then you're probably going to be better off. because at least you have some backup. You know, babies are very, very slippery when they come out. I mean, they're covered with the amniotic fluid and the other fluids, and they are slippery. And they're even more slippery if they are born in a pool. So you need to recognize that. And you need to also be like, okay, well, if I had a doula who's like, oh, I'm not touching you at all, like never, then that's going to be a problem. If you have a virtual doula, then you need to also be aware that maybe she's not able to physically help you, but she can guide your partner. So she needs to be aware that your partner needs to be trained up. Your partner can't be freaking out, because number 5 in the 5 pillars is the right support. Your partner needs to be like, okay, if you don't end up being able to catch this baby, I'm going to step up and I'm going to catch the baby. Because honestly, the first hands that should touch your baby should be yours or your partner's. That is the bonding. That is the way that nature intended it. Why are we allowing strangers to touch our baby first? Why are we doing this? This is confusing to the baby. It's not a gentle process to do that. And you know, sometimes we do need help. But even then, I have seen gentle cesareans where mom's hands are the ones that bring the baby up. The doctor's like, okay, mom, you can now pull the baby up. And she does it. She's got the gloves on and she actually takes her baby and brings them back out. So it's got a little bit of help, of course, but still, why can't we? Why can't we bring our own babies into the world? Why is it that we are having to give up our power? It doesn't make any sense to me. So now you understand the empowered birth method of basically the right mindset, the right education, the right environment, the right facilitators, and the right support. If you want to go deeper with that, I do have it inside of my book, Your Empowered Birth. That's the little blue book behind me. And you can basically go through and get those 5 pillars. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to the team, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. So now you understand more about how to apply the empowered birth method. I'm also going to tell you how to go deeper with this, okay? So if you are new to me and you have not been in the community for very long and you might have some underlying fears, then the first thing I would suggest is the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth mini challenge. Inside of module number 4, which is the final video of the series especially, I even address the issue of birth on your back and why it is so stupid. So you can even go through a little deeper and you can learn more about the history of this and how it came to be. I basically debunk these myths because fish can't see the water that they swim in. And when you don't really see the trauma, you normalize it. When everybody is birthing on their back and even the media is depicting birth on backs, and even your family members are all like, oh yeah, I birthed on my back and I got an episiotomy and I got a forceps delivery and all of that, that is immersing you in that culture of fear. You need to be able to see it to get out of it. So go check out the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth mini challenge if you haven't already done that, or it's been a while. The next thing, of course, is Your Empowered Birth. If you have that baseline, then you understand how to stand in your power. And finally, there is a module within Your Empowered Birth workshop. So you just put your name and email in and you get that course. And in module 2, I go into physiological birth. So you can understand more about how that works. There is information on the birthing stage. But I suggest you go through the course one module at a time, because the way that my courses are all designed, and even the way that my book is put together, it is to help you release your fears and reprogram you for an empowered birth so that you are standing in your power and your intuition. You've reclaimed that power and you're getting that birth education laced in there at the same time. So it's easy to go through. And at the same time, there are a lot of complex things that are happening below the surface to help you stand in your power, because you are your own best expert. I'm just the guide. And everyone is a human first and an expert second. So you are your own best expert. You know what you need. You need to be able to stand in your power and advocate for yourself strongly. And to do that, you use the empowered birth method. Finally, there are 3 paths to getting the empowered birth method because, again, information is free and I only charge for access to me. So, path number 3 is premium coaching. And this is what I do with most of my high level clients. This is where a lot of my case stories come from. Is that I work one-to-one. This is not accessible to everyone. And it is a steep price tag to work with me, and it is a high time commitment. You'd basically need to meet with me at least once a week, and you would have exercises to do in the meantime. So journal prompts, or maybe I would suggest that you work through a fear. It's custom tailored to you and your unique experience. Every single one of my clients is completely unique and they have a completely different map. I take pieces of their own map and then I also alchemize it with what I have within the empowered birth method and all of my information. But make no mistake, just because I am taking on these clients, it doesn't necessarily mean that I am saving them. And my clients will even say to me, it's like, you saved me from a C-section. You saved me from another traumatic birth. I'm like, no, no, no. You saved yourself because you said yes to yourself and you chose to get the premium coaching from me. You chose to work with me. You chose to go deeper with this and you took your power back. No permission needed. I simply just gave you your own light back. I said, here's your power. I think you dropped it. Take it back. And you took it back. You didn't just say, no, 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 you keep the power and let me just coast in the passenger seat. No, you took your power back. So the thing is, though, I don't work with everyone who comes to me. You need to be very coachable. You need to be able to afford it. And you need to be able to have that time commitment available. So there is a path for that. You can fill out an intake form if you really do like the fast path to premium coaching. There are some requirements. I'm going to ask you some questions. Priority also tends to go to those who have already read my book and gone through at least one self-study program. This is again because I want to make sure that you have that baseline education. So if I said, hey, can I see what you have in your birth plan? You would be able to present that to me because this is a laser coaching session to start off with. That means you get 15 minutes of my time focused on your most important questions. And if it's something that is surface level that I already have a video on, I would much rather you just get that information for free rather than try to pay for a call that is not really needed, right? You need to be able to invest in yourself, but we're also not going to just buy for the sake of buying. That gets us stuck too. So the second path is self-study. And this is where you can basically get my coaching without me coaching you personally. So with self-study, you go through my programs. I have one that is a starter program. After the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth mini challenge, you can go into your Empowered Birth workshop. Technically, my book is also self-study because you are going through and you are answering questions and getting those aha moments. But as you're going through, the important thing is that you implement the information. Otherwise, you might as well just be watching videos in the master classes and the do-it-yourself path. There's no reason to go through a course if you're not going to do the work. Because even within the deep dive master classes, you're still getting the information. It's just a little bit more scattered. And it's tailored to different topics, such as castor oil, such as induction, such as Pitocin. I mean, take your pick. I'm basically putting this all out there because information is free and I only charge for access to me. So with self-study, though, there are 2 tiers to it. Because, sometimes you might want to have somebody walk you through the process. And that is why I have an upgraded version of Self-Study VIP. You can go into this at any time, okay? So don't think that you have to go and get Self-Study VIP right away. You can just test out the material. Now, I do have some self-study VIP programs that will never become complete self-study, which means that you would always need to pay access to get them. But even that can be kind of a little loophole here, because if you have gone through enough of the self-study programs and you can show me that you're doing the work, And hey, maybe you trade for some support as a member of my Queens of Court. Then what this does is, if you think about it like a queen and having her ladies in waiting, if you are serving me, I'm going to give you all of the secrets, right? So if you, for any reason, couldn't afford some of my higher level programs, there is a path to get through. And I have had the same thing happen for me where my mentors knew that I wouldn't be able to get access to certain programs if they hadn't supported me. So even within the lower tiers of self-study, even within the do-it-yourself path, if you can show me that you can do the work and you are committed to the empowered birth movement, I may just give you a little bit of extra support. I may even gift you a laser coaching session. You never know. I do reward action takers. So within the do-it-yourself path, especially, I'm going to ask you that you pay it forward. Like, share, subscribe to this channel, comment on the videos, because if you comment, that is going to boost the algorithm. I'm also going to encourage you to share this with other moms. Drop these videos into the mom groups, because often they get those surface level videos or they get a link to a podcast with a whole bunch of episodes, and those are fine. They're awesome. But at the same time, a lot of what I teach within the empowered birth method allows for those additional pieces of information to be enhanced. Because oftentimes what I see in the birth community is there's a lot of really good information. And I would always share that information, even as a birth advocate. But there's pieces missing. There's a psychological component, or there's context missing, or they don't really know how to piece it together to apply it within a certain system or situation. And that is why I basically say information is free and I only charge for access to me. So please pay it forward. Please like, share, subscribe, pass this on. Do the work. If you find any additional valuable resources and you want to let me in on them, that is currency in itself. I love information. I collect it. I add it to the resource library that I have inside my Google Drive. So the more that you give me access to other pieces of information or share your own empowered birth journey, the more you're going to get noticed. Okay. So now you understand more about those three paths. And if you want to go deeper with that, you can go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. But now we're going to recap quickly. Why don't you want to birth on your back? Well, first of all, it's undermining your confidence, because if you are flat on your back like a turtle and you are not able to push your baby out by some arbitrary timeline, you're thinking that your body just doesn't birth effectively or that your pelvis is too small. And if you did end up getting tricked and got a C-section because of it, or they severely damaged your pelvic floor with the vacuum and forceps delivery, then that is more likely to lead to trauma in the future and you choosing a more interventive birth because you think that your body is broken. It's not broken. The medical system just did their thing and you didn't know and you weren't able to follow your instinct, and that is why things went the way they did. This again leads to unnecessary interventions, the episiotomy, the forceps delivery, even a C-section. There's been many times where a mom has been pushing for 3 hours and then they're like, oh, it's not going to work. We're going to just call a C-section. I'm like, well, did you actually help her or did you just have her flat on her back? And 9 times out of 10, she was on her back. So then the other one finally is this sabotages your physiological birth process. You're not designed to birth on your back. Think about any other mammal that you can look at, like cats, dogs, like horses. Are they on their backs to birth? No. Well, then why the heck are humans being put on their backs? Even monkeys, our closest cousins, are not birthing on their backs. They're usually squatting. So understanding that, this is ridiculous that we're on our backs and it is not supporting our birth physiology. It's causing us to have more tearing. It's damaging our pelvic floor and it's often leading to interventive births. You then recognize, wait a minute, why is the hospital putting all these moms on their backs? Well, Again, it's convenience because when doctors came into birth and maternity care, they were all men. They all had this idea that women's bodies were not efficient at birthing. They wanted to see what was going on. They probably even got their jollies off by seeing this happen. They wanted to use their tools, so they would use their tools on everyone. And in order to use their tools on everyone, you needed to be flat on your back for them to have access to you. And then by the time that birth got into the hospitals, this became routine. You also have to recognize, and I mentioned this a little bit deeper inside of the Reset Your Mindset for Empowered Birth Challenge, is that twilight sleep, moms were strapped down and they had their babies dragged out with forceps. So they, again, were on their backs. So now that you understand about why we don't want to birth on our backs, it's the end of the series pretty much. We have one more video left, and then we are going to be starting a new Empowered Birth series. So what you really need to take away from this is that a lot of the time when maternity care practices are implemented, they make no sense. They really make no sense for birth physiology. And the more you understand how much they go against birth physiology, the more you realize that you are falling into a trap. So thank you again for watching. If you want to go back and watch this again or go check out some more of the Empowered Birth series, you are more than welcome to do that. If you want to go deeper, as I said, there is a course that you can go and get access to. You just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/workshop, put your name and email in, and you will get emailed that course and instant access right away, no having to pay anything. It's about 6 hours long, and you can also binge on those videos. So I also cut them up into little sections. So it's not like you're going to have to sit there for 6 hours. You can just watch 1 or 2 videos, then take a break, then come back. But ultimately, it's about 6 hours long if you were to watch it all at once. Which, you know, if you are a star student and you want to do that and spend an afternoon watching the videos, you're more than welcome to. But the thing is that information is free. And I want you to continue to follow the Empowered Birth series because I'm going to be going deep into everything that you need to know to plan and get your empowered true natural birth. I'm also going to connect you to other resources. I'm going to tell you about my Empowered Birth Circle and my Empowered Mom Circle beyond that. Because when you have an empowered birth, you're an empowered mom for life, and no one can take your power away from you again. So thank you so much for watching. If you found value in this, please like, share, subscribe to this channel, pay it forward, pass it on. A drop in the ocean creates ripples. Many ripples create waves, and enough waves can change the tide. And here at Empowering Moms, I'm all about changing the tide. So whether you're birthing a baby, birthing a business, birthing a creative project or a movement, or rebirthing a new version of yourself, Empowering Moms is here for you. And next week, we're going to be tackling trap number 20. The final one, mainstream childbirth education, and how it is the biggest natural birth trap because it's the culmination of all of them. So stay tuned for that. I will see you again next week. Thank you again, and have a happy, empowered birth journey. Namaste.